Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to talk about a case that happened right here in Edmonton back in 2012. It's a pretty horrible case, and it's the case of Travis Brandon Baumgartner. So if you're not familiar with this one, what happened in very broad strokes is that Mr. Baumgartner was working as an armored security guard, and he murdered several of his coworkers. He in fact tried to murder the remaining coworker, and then attempted to flee with the money and didn't get very far. Now, we're going to go through this in some more detail. We're going to look at this through the agreed statement of facts. And what an agreed statement of facts is pretty much what it says on the tin. It is an agreement between both sides, so in this case, the prosecution and the defense, as to certain facts that will then be treated as proved by the court. Now, in this case, this agreed statement of facts is being used as part of a guilty plea because he pled guilty and he received a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 40 years. So he's going to be in custody for probably the rest of his life. Let's have a look at this case, see what was going down, and I'm going to explain some things as we go just to offer some commentary and some discussion of this. So as mentioned, the case of Travis Baumgartner. The accused has pleaded guilty to charges that he, count one, on or about the 15th day of June 2012, at or near Edmonton, Alberta, did unlawfully cause the death of Brian Ilesic, thereby committing second-degree murder, contrary to Section 235, Sub 1 of the Criminal Code of Canada. Now, I'm not going to go through every count in that full detail, but you do see that when they lay these charges, they have the on or about and the at or near. The reason for that is that they don't want to create a defect in the charge by, if there's some technical problem. Like if it was technically after midnight and it was June 16th, well, yeah, it's still on or about the 15th day of June. So one count of second-degree murder. The next count with respect to an Edgardo Reggiano is a count of first-degree murder. And then there's another count of second-degree murder for Michelle Shagelski, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. And then with respect to Matthew Schumann, it was attempt to murder him while using a firearm. Mr. Schumann survived and unfortunately has suffered some very serious and lasting consequences. From what I understand from reading follow-up reports, he's apparently healing quite well, but quite well under the circumstances still means he's likely to face some lifelong challenges and difficulties. So let's keep going here. G4S Cash Solutions Canada Limited, and which they'll just call G4S going forward, is a multinational corporation providing security services, including armored car services, in more than 125 countries. Part of the armored car services includes cash replenishment in automated teller machines, ATMs. G4S has over 657,000 employees worldwide. Now, just as a small note, G4S Cash Solutions no longer exists. I understand it's now G4S Security Services or something like that. I'm not sure the exact name. This was a key point because some of the families of the people killed tried to sue them over these events and alleging inadequate training and so forth. I couldn't find what happened in that lawsuit, but one of the defenses was basically they were saying, "Oh, we don't exist anymore because we had this sort of restructuring or this acquisition or whatever the sort of merger or change was." Now, I couldn't find a result to that, so I'm hoping there was a settlement of some variety, but I don't know. All right, carrying on. At the time of the described events, the accused, Travis Brandon Baumgartner, was an armored car security guard for G4S. Brian Ilesic, and they give birth dates, Edgardo Reggiano, Michelle Shagelski, and Matthew Schumann, and I've blocked out his birth date because he's still alive, and so I don't think he needs any more trouble with that detail being on the internet. We're also G4S guards who worked with the accused regularly. Matthew worked at G4S on a casual basis as he was a firefighter with the military, so somebody who's also serving his country. He'd gone to the same G4S training course as Eddie and the accused. Their shift on June 14th, 2012 was Matthew's third day employed by G4S and his first training shift. He'd just been issued his revolver that day. So this is kind of the opposite of the usual thing you see in movies where it's like, 3 days to retirement or whatever. It's still really tragic. Michelle had been employed with G4S for approximately 4 years and held the positions of trainer and custodian. Brian had been employed with G4S for approximately 6 months and was being trained for the position of custodian. Eddie had recently started with G4S, being employed there for approximately 3 months. The accused had commenced his employment with G4S on April 12th, 2012, so fairly recently here. The accused owed $58,000 for his recently purchased Ford F-150 truck. His mother, Sandra, co-signed for the loan, so she's got some financial skin in the game. He owed at least 2 of his friends money and was always getting his friends to pay for things. On June 14th, 2012, the accused had an account with TD Bank with a balance of 26 cents. So you can see that he is basically at this stage of his life in financial freefall. It's good that he's getting a job, but that wasn't how he ended up planning to solve his financial problems. But carrying on. The accused paid his mother rent to live in the basement of their home in Sherwood Park, Alberta. The money would be directly deposited once per month, and Sandra was trying to get the accused to change the deposits to twice per month. This led to an argument between them on the afternoon of June 14th, 2012. Now, I don't know if this is that she just wanted to be paid half as much but twice as often, or if she was saying, hey, listen, you gotta up the payments. But either way, he was arguing with his mother over money. The argument got quite heated. The accused told her not to worry. She would get her money. Sandra described the accused as a different person that night, and he was so cold. The argument concluded with the accused telling his mother, "It doesn't even matter. I'm not coming home, so don't worry about it. You'll get your money." Sandra started crying and went into her bedroom as the accused left for his shift at G4S at approximately 1800 hours. The accused reported to the G4S worksite located at the address and parked his truck, a Ford F-150, outside the employee parking lot. Now, the Ford F-150 is not a cheap truck. We see that he owes $58,000 on it. If you're in this kind of dire financial straits, getting a car that costs that much is probably not a great move, but it's a popular Alberta move outside of the employee parking lot. This was not unusual for him, as he preferred the more secluded location to prevent any other employees from damaging his vehicle. You can see that he maybe doesn't have the best relationship with his coworkers. The accused was assigned to work that evening with Brian, Eddie, Michelle, and Matthew on a routine circuit replenishing money in ATMs throughout Edmonton. The crew is normally 4 people, however this was a training run with Michelle training the accused, Matthew, and Brian. The accused and Brian were in the armored truck Eddie was driving. They were being followed by Michelle and Matthew in the van. All of the G4S employees were in uniform and were armed with .38 caliber 6-shot revolvers, as well as 2 speed loaders on their belt. Speed loaders contain 6 bullets that all can be loaded into the handgun at once. Each member had 18 rounds of ammunition in total. The ammunition was hollow point. A hollow point bullet is an expanding bullet that has a pit or hollowed out shape in its tip, often intended to cause the bullet to expand upon entering a target in order to decrease penetration and maximize tissue damage and blood loss or shock. So, this is all accurate statements about the firearms, which I'm kind of impressed by, because sometimes I see not so accurate statements, especially when you start talking about hollow point ammunition. Often it gets to kind of the overwrought or the kind of fanciful sometimes. Now, I don't know why they're armed with revolvers. Revolvers seem like maybe not the best choice here. I would have assumed some sort of semi-automatic firearm. It takes some practice to load effectively with a speed loader, but that's what they had. So this is not my ideal sort of setup, but the one thing that I will say for revolvers is that they can be more reliable in the hands of people who are not familiar with how to do a clearing drill. Although revolvers, when they do sort of jam up, can be much more difficult to clear. Anyway, that's sort of enough on the gun aspects here, because that's not really a key element to this, other than just the fact that they had them. During the course of the early evening, the accused was texting his friend Dylan. Dylan had known the accused since they were in grade 7 together. The accused was joking about robbing G4S and said something along the line of, "This is the night." The accused had mentioned robbing G4S before, but always said it jokingly. That is the reason Dilla did not react to it. And, it's easy to sort of judge these kinds of things after the fact, but if somebody's always kind of cracking wise, you might go, okay, it's just another joke. The accused made a number of comments on Facebook, an internet social media website, over the previous 3 months. Now, of course, he's probably making lots of comments on Facebook, right? So this is cherry-picked comments off of his Facebook. So on April 19th, 2012, 2 days till training, I get a gun, smiley face with a little winky. May 12th, 2012, 100% shooting test, I'm a god. Slow your roll. May 10th, 2012, I had a dream where I went back to Haythorne and beat the shit out of anyone or anybody that made fun of me in the past. I love my mind. I wonder if that's still true, now that he's going to be spending a lot of time alone with it. June 1, 2012, I wonder if I'd make the 6 o'clock news if I just started popping people off. June 9th, 2012, the accused changed his profile picture, showing him wearing a vest, a balaclava, and sunglasses looking down. Now, again, all of this stuff is probably going to be a lot easier to sort of judge in hindsight when you're looking at, cherry-picked statements. But that's going to be fairly common for an agreed statement of facts. There's nothing sort of inappropriate here. So the 5 G4S members headed out and made 2 stops prior to their stop at Hub Mall. Hub Mall is a combined shopping mall and student residence located at the University of Alberta. It measures 4 city blocks in length, running north to south. Now, I went to the University of Alberta for law school. Hub Mall is actually a pretty cool little setup. It's got student residences sort of above, so they can sort of look down, and there's space there. But it's also this like walking mall where you just walk through and you can pick up. There's stores with like student supplies, stores with books. They've got places to eat. It's actually a really cool feature of the University of Alberta. It's one of the things I really like about the University of Alberta. So that is just kind of an aside, but it's a really neat feature. So shortly after midnight on June 15th, 2012, the accused and his 4 co-workers arrived at the north end of Hub Mall. Eddie drove into the turnaround area, which was covered, and parked the truck. Michelle parked the van on the east side of the turnaround. They were there to deposit money into 2 ATMs located on the 2nd floor of Hub Mall. The accused, Brian, Michelle, and Matthew, all entered the mall and walked up 2 flights of stairs. Eddie remained outside with the armored car. The distance from the exterior door of the TD ATM vestibule to the exterior entrance door to stairwell 9203 is 10 meters. The distance from the interior of that door down the stairs to the door at the bottom is approximately 14 meters. The accused, Brian, Michelle, and Matthew, entered the small secure vestibule providing access to the ATM. The vestibule is secured by a steel door which locks automatically when it is closed. The door cannot be accessed from the outside without a key. Brian was in possession of the key at all times. Brian and Matthew were at the ATM, kneeling or crouched, preparing to put in the money. Michelle was standing behind them, observing and supervising. So everybody is paying attention to the machine here, right? And the accused is the only person kind of not with a task. So that's a bit of an issue here because the accused was standing at the doorway with the door closed and secured, so nobody's able to come in to help, theoretically, not that they would have, because here in Canada, there wouldn't have been anybody who was armed to do so. So with the door closed and secured, while the 3 guards were facing away from the accused and concentrating on their jobs, the accused removed his G4S issued 38 caliber handgun from its holster. He shot Matthew in the left side of his head at point blank range. He then shot Michelle in her head, also at point blank range, killing her instantly. Then he shot Brian twice in his head, also at point blank range, killing him instantly. The accused had shot all 6 bullets from his gun. Police later identified 2 holes in the vestibule consistent with fired projectiles. The accused had fired the 2 shots through the wall of the dorm adjacent to the ATM vestibule, with 1 striking the bathtub. So that would have been a serious risk to anybody who might have been in there. Not a good day to be taking a bath. The accused then left the ATM vestibule, shutting the door, leaving Brian, Michelle, and Matthew locked inside. Even if he'd wanted to do so, the accused could not have re-entered the vestibule since the key was locked inside. The accused proceeded quickly through Hub Mall back toward the armored car. One of his students in Hub Mall described him as running away. When the accused reached the bottom of the stairs, he removed one speed loader from his belt and reloaded the handgun. He exited the mall and moved towards the armored car, approaching Eddie. The accused faced him and shot Eddie underneath his right eye. He then shot him twice in the back of the head, killing him. The accused left Eddie lying face down in a pool of blood on the paved roadway as he entered the driver's seat of the armored car and drove away. So this is a very cowardly attack here, and it's a horrific event. This absolutely was on every this was plastered on every news organization, especially because at this point people weren't really clear on what happened. There was a lot of doubt and uncertainty as to what was going on. It took some time for people to realize that it was another member of the armored car group, and then even then it was sort of wondering what the motives were and so forth. So several members of the public called 911 stating that they'd heard shots fired at Hub Mall. The initial call was received at 12 minutes after midnight. 2 Safe Walk members, volunteers who will accompany people who do not wish to walk around the university alone, Ashley and Safira, were in Hub Mall approximately halfway down the Rutherford Library when they heard a thud. They reached the TD ATM and heard moaning and saw what appeared to be blood coming from underneath the door. Now, I just want to say, we don't have last names for these people, and that's a good thing because, as much as that information is probably publicly out there already, it really doesn't need to be put into a video like this. But these are unarmed volunteers. They will not, this is Canada, so they're not going to have pepper spray. They're not going to have a firearm. They're not even going to have a knife. And they heard gunfire and a thud, and they ran towards it. That is some courage. So, I'm very glad that they didn't encounter the accused on this one. If they'd run into Mr. Baumgartner, the results could have been tragic. But we can kind of compare this with the Uvalde events, because, yeah, I guess I'll leave it there as to my thoughts. But, yeah. So they go to try to help, and unfortunately they can't because the vestibule is closed and locked. So students and staff in the Hub Mall heard Matthew's cries for help and called police because he's still alive. Safira led the responding APS members to the ATM vestibule, so the police. It was securely locked. Since the door opened outward, it was impossible to batter down. However, they got a battering ram out of the trunk of the police vehicle and they went upstairs, and he noticed blood seeping under the door and heard a male screaming incoherently. He attempted to open the door, but it was locked, and went back downstairs to get additional tools to try to unlock the door. Sergeant Johnson attempted to speak with the male inside, who just kept yelling, "Help me," in a slurred voice. And you can understand why he's not able to be more helpful, because he's been shot in the head. He's really sort of struggling to stay alive at this stage. Many of his other words spoken were incomprehensible. There was a metal ventilation screen at the bottom of the door, which Sergeant Johnson punched out with the ram. He was then able to look inside and see 3 bodies. Constable Dohaniak returned with a pickaxe, sledgehammer, and bolt cutters. A total of 7 Edmonton Police Service members then attempted to gain entry into the vestibule. Those are some tough doors. They started to breach the door with the pickaxe and the ram to break the door handle. With the pickaxe and bolt cutters, they eventually were able to pry the door outward. They estimated it took 1 to 2 minutes to gain entry. Now, I wonder if they could have gotten in faster if, often those doors are rigged such that they have to be able to, you can open them to get out, but they wouldn't have known that. That's the kind of training that the officers probably wouldn't have had. I don't know if it matters here because it was 1 to 2 minutes. They got in quite quickly, but this is a situation where seconds count. I'm not trying to fault the officers here. It's, they're doing the best they can with what they can, and it's, you're not going to be thinking clearly at the best of times, and this is probably just a point that they weren't trained on, but I can't say for certain. Police formed a rapid deployment entry team. This is, again, I'm going to have a little shout out here to Uvalde, not in the praiseworthy sense, but Canada has had essentially a doctrine for responding to these kinds of horrible events. And that doctrine is you need to get officers on scene to engage fast. And at this point, the police are not really clear as to whether or not this is a safe situation. They're entering into a situation that could be dangerous. And they're going in. And that's praiseworthy. So they say first responders who act without assistance of the tactical unit due to exigent circumstances. So the whole idea is basically they are forming up. They're going to go in right now, even though the heavy hitters, the tactical team, is not there yet and probably not going to get there for a while. Once inside, they saw the two deceased victims, Brian and Michelle, and they saw Matthew. All were in full G4S uniform and still had their firearms secured in their holsters. None of them even managed to draw, unfortunately. There was a significant amount of blood on the floor around them in this very small room. Matthew had a chunk of his skull missing and his brain was exposed. EPS members cleared the room of threats and pulled Matthew, Michelle, and Brian out of the vestibule. Constables Dack and Constables Lee stayed with Matthew, who had no recollection of the incident, but was able to identify himself by his first name. Constable Dack provided gentle and direct pressure to the head wound and continued to talk to Matthew, trying to provide comfort. Matthew made several statements that he was done for and begged the officer to help him and hurry up. Because of Matthew's profoundly delicate condition, the EPS members and paramedics were unable to take him down the narrow set of stairs closest to the ATM vestibule. Because, of course, he's hanging on, right? This is a situation where he is, you don't want to jostle somebody whose brain is exposed. So they had to carry him on a stretcher down the length of Hub Mall to the other set of stairs, not knowing who the suspect was and where he was. So again, we see bravery on the part of everybody who's responding here, because, they don't know if this person is hiding in a stairwell. They don't know what's going on. They're having to react somewhat blind. Once they managed to get him outside, Matthew was taken by ambulance to the University of Alberta Hospital Emergency Department, where he underwent a CT scan and emergency surgery from 2:30 to 6 o'clock. The surgeons retrieved one bullet from Matthew's head. The accused ultimately made his way back towards the G4S worksite and parked the armored car next to his own truck. He moved 3 packages of cash from the armored car into his vehicle. The amount was initially estimated to be $360,000. He left the rest of the cash in the armored car and he drove away. This was all recorded by a private video surveillance camera. So already he's not getting away with much because they've got him on camera. The accused stopped at the residences of 2 of his friends in Sherwood Park and, without them knowing he was doing so, he left them money. After hearing the news reports in the media, both friends notified police and returned all of the money. While at one of his friends, the accused destroyed his cell phone so it could not be used to track him. So his friends, after hearing what's happened, they've found this money. They're like, no, we're not keeping it. I'll have some more comments on that in a moment here. The accused returned to his mother's residence in Sherwood Park, where he changed his clothes and left his G4S uniform and boots at the house. He left a large bundle of cash on his mother's kitchen table and left. The money was estimated to be approximately $64,000. His mother discovered the money the next morning, and she notified police of her discovery, and they seized the money. They also seized the accused's boots and pants, noting obvious blood spatter on his boots. The DNA analysis of these exhibits showed conclusively that the blood was that of Michelle and Eddie. The accused swapped the license plates between his truck and his mother's vehicle. He then left with his truck and the remainder of the stolen money. Now, everybody in his life who he tried to leave this money for, which is probably people he owed money to, immediately rejected it. When you engage in this kind of cowardly, act, he probably thought that he was squaring himself up with his friends and, his mother, and that they'd remember him fondly. And instead, the immediate thing is that everyone involved is going to be remembering him with disgust and with, they don't want anything to do with his attempt to repay them. They're all behaving better than he is. So Members of the EPS, along with RCMP in Edmonton, Sherwood Park, Langley, BC, Canadian Border Security Agency, and U.S. Homeland Security participated in the investigation and efforts to apprehend the accused. At this point on the media, it was pretty much nonstop, that this guy has committed these horrific events. They're blasting his picture out. Everybody is looking for this guy. It's a huge manhunt. They determined the accused was the suspect and issued a Canada-wide warrant for his arrest. Because, of course, they're going to issue a Canada-wide warrant, right? They're not going to say, oh, sure, if he makes it across the border into BC, he's home free. Yeah, no. The accused proceeded southwest in his truck. At or near Banff, Alberta, he discarded his G4S firearm and vest in a river. He proceeded to the United States border station at the port of Lyndon, Washington, located near Langley. So he figures he's going to go to the U.S. and everything's going to be great. He doesn't plan this out very well. You'll see as we go. His plans are ridiculously bad. At 15:08 hours, the accused approached the booth at the border crossing. As the vehicle passed the license plate reader, the armed and dangerous alert sounded from the computer because he's still rocking his mother's license plate. And of course the police, that was plugged into the system. The accused was arrested by U.S. authorities. He had no passport on his person. So how's he going to get across the border? The border guards located several large bundles of Canadian currency in a black backpack in the truck, as well as bundles scattered throughout the truck. It totaled $333,580. Now you might have been saying, wait a minute, if you do the math on all these numbers, it doesn't add up. Remember, they said it was an initial estimate of $360,000. It was clearly more than that. The accused said to border guards that he didn't remember anything for the last 3 to 4 days, and that he was snatched and had a gun put in his face by a guy who told him to drive to Seattle and deliver the backpack to him, or he would kill his family. This story is not super plausible, right? It gets even less plausible as we go. At approximately 22:18 hours, the accused was taken to the Aldergrove, BC border crossing. He was told of his charter rights and provided access to legal counsel. He was then returned to his cell. At 10:25 hours the next day, he was removed from the cell for initial questioning by EPS homicide detective Scott Jones. The accused indicated that his name was David Webb. Now, some of you, the really perceptive people, are probably already going, wait a minute, but we'll get to it. And he claimed to have memory issues in relation to recent events. The accused was then returned to a holding cell on his own, and then at 13:48 hours, so almost 2 o'clock, he was placed in the same cell as an undercover RCMP police officer, UC officer. The UC officer was portraying an experienced inmate. Why don't they give us the UC officer's name? Because he's undercover, and they don't want to announce who their undercovers are, right? Now, keep in mind, if you have ever committed an offense like this, that is going to be getting national or international attention, they are not putting you in a cell with another inmate. It's just not going to happen. The reason why is that there's two things they're going to be worried about. One, you kill the other inmate, in which case the other inmate is, he's got family, he's got friends, he's got next of kin who are going to sue the crap out of the police for going, hey, you just took, Murder McKillerson and put them in a cell with my family member, and oh right, the obvious thing happened, and wasn't that a stupid thing to do? Wasn't that a negligent thing to do? So the police don't want that scenario. The other possibility is that they put you into this cell with this other guy, and maybe he decides to take you out so that he gets some cred at the, when he goes to jail. Cops don't want that either, because now at this point, you're their big get. And they really want to be able to trot you out in front of a trial and show that they got their... What they really don't want is, oh, we screwed up and he got murdered in the in cells. Whoops, our bad. So any lawyer that you talk to is going to tell you to keep your mouth shut. And not just keep your mouth shut with, detective friendly who's going to go in and smile at you and try to get you to talk about things, but also with whoever's, whatever, cellmate and whatever else. Even if you assume for some reason that they put you in with a regular cellmate, your cellmate has every incentive to throw you under the bus. If you say something, that cellmate has every incentive to be like, oh yeah, by the way, he said these things, and maybe I could get a sentence reduction or, some sort of deal if I testify about that. So yeah, when your lawyer tells you keep your mouth shut about the case, they mean everything about the case and to everybody other than your lawyer. That's family, that's friends, that's the cops especially, that's the undercover officer who's pretending to be your buddy in cells. All right, carrying on here. The interaction between the undercover officer and the accused was both audio and video recorded, because of course it is. They talked about general issues, and at one point the accused stated he didn't remember anything, and they'd been calling him Travis, but his name was David Webb. He told the undercover officer that he'd been told he killed 3 people, also stating that he didn't remember anything from the last 5 days and barely remembered anything about his life, so he's keeping up the lie. And now they're going to tell us who David Webb is. So, paragraph 35 here, David Webb is the real name of the fictional character Jason Bourne, the protagonist of a series of novels by Robert Ludlum and subsequent film adaptation. Jason Bourne's character is that of a covert assassin. On a job in France, he was shot in the back and awakens with his memory gone. Come on! If you're going to be coming up with some BS story, oh man, this is just embarrassing. This is... So, and I also got to give serious props to the prosecutor on this one, who made sure to insert this line into the agreed statement of facts, because he's like, nope, I insist, we're going to explain to the court about just how... And that prosecutor is now a judge. So, yeah, it's just stunning that you would, like, why would you assume that the cops are that stupid? There's going to be lots of them. They're going to have lots of time. They're going to, you don't think that they're going to take the name you gave them and plug it into Google to see if they can find a reference to you? A LinkedIn page, a Facebook page, somebody who says they met you at a party once, whatever. They're trying to figure out who you are or, what this story is about. So, yeah. Anyway, the accused was removed from the cell at almost 3 o'clock to go speak with Detective Jones. The accused was adamant he was David Webb and continued to tell Detective Jones that he did not remember anything. He said that he last remembered being in a truck, in a sleeping bag on a pillow, and being woken up by a man. He provided a description of this man having short blonde hair, brown eyes, and a tribal tattoo on his face. He claimed the man had a gun to the accused's face and said he was always watching my mom and was going to kill her if he did not deliver his money. He was to drive to Seattle and somehow this man would find him despite the fact the accused no longer had a phone. He then told Detective Jones, "I'm just trying to help my mom, sir." I kind of feel like your mom doesn't feel super helped. And, I mean, this story also makes no sense. Like, pick a story. He's saying, I've got no memory, but also this guy is gonna, is giving me this bag and sending me off to Seattle. Well, how did this guy steal your memory? Is he a wizard? So he's Jason Bourne, and he's being attacked by a wizard who is making him run money into the States. There was just no thought about this. Yeah. Detective Jones left the room at 16:27 hours and returned at 16:43 hours. Upon his return, the accused told Detective Jones, "I just can't believe I would do something like that." He recalled going to work that night around 6:30. Detective Jones asked, "Were you mad when you got there?" To which the accused replied, "I think so, just mad at the world, I guess." He said everyone at G4S teased him. He described G4S management as uncaring. He was mad at work and further aggravated by problems they experienced that night with their initial armored truck. "Thought you said you didn't remember things, bro." All right. He recalled having 2 stops prior to Hub Mall. He said, "Did our first 2 stops, I remember still being very angry." So this was, I don't have a copy of this interrogation. I don't think it was ever tendered as a court exhibit. But I'm going to guess that there was some pretty masterful inter, interview slash interrogation here. At 16:51 hours, the accused admitted to Detective Jones that he shot his 3 co-workers and Eddie, who was outside the truck. He didn't recall any reasoning to the order in which he shot them. He stated, "I think I was just mad at everybody." He admitted that when he shot at each of them, he was aiming for their heads. After he shot Eddie, he got in the truck and drove, ending up at G4S. He drove to his house and grabbed some things and left money for his mom. He went to his first friend's house, leaving him money, and then to the second's. He felt he owed his second friend money for all that he'd forked out for him over the years. He said he didn't get along with anybody at work, everybody always made fun of him, and he kept to himself. He described what he did as a blind rage. He put the vest in water in a different place from the gun. He said they would be long down the river by now, probably in the ocean. No one will get it. He made sure of that. And I don't know if they ever found that, because I'm guessing that river might have been dredged. But during the interview, the accused would become emotional, placing his hands on his face and crying. Near the conclusion of the interview, the accused wrote a letter to the victims expressing regret for his actions. This is a very common interrogation tactic. They'll say, write a letter, it'll be great for sentencing. And it might actually have helped with sentencing, although if you're going to write a letter for sentencing, you don't do it and give it to the police. A letter expressing regret for your actions is a written confession. So they got a written confession out of him as well as the verbal confession. And yeah, that's what that was about. Now, you see how he's, expressing regret, which might be taken at sentencing as he's showing remorse. Well, he's already confessed to everything, but they put him back in the cell with the undercover officer because they're not done with him. So the accused was returned to the same holding cell with the undercover officer at 18:05 hours. The conversation between the two was again video and audio recorded. The accused sat down on his bunk and immediately stated, "I did it all." Without prompting, he admitted to having killed those people and robbed their truck. During the course of their lengthy discourse, the accused discussed the circumstances of the offense and that the evidence they had against him was undeniable. He told the officer, "Yeah, just fucking shot 3 people, actually 4 people. Put the money in my truck and drove away. Got rid of all the evidence, threw the gun away." He told the undercover officer it was a .38 and point blank range too. The officer remarked, "The jump on 4 at point blank?" The accused replied, "Yeah." The officer said, "You must be fast." The accused chuckled and responded, "I guess I am." They got him bragging. That bragging, of course, is going to be terrible on sentencing. You know how I said maybe you could use that, letter as showing, remorse? That showing remorse goes away real fast when they get you bragging afterwards. This undercover officer is doing excellent work being an undercover officer, and Mr. Baumgartner is absolutely getting destroyed here, and he doesn't even realize it. He thinks he's just having a nice chat. Doesn't it feel great to talk about this? Bet it didn't feel great later. Not that I have any sympathy for the guy. I mean, this is just looking at sort of how the sausage is made. This is how investigations happen. So he told the officer it was I just went over that. The conversation lasted from 18:05 to 19:42 hours. Throughout the conversation, the accused was very relaxed with the undercover officer. He was very matter-of-fact in the way he spoke, and sometimes would sigh and chuckle. The accused continued about prison and what it was like. Then the conversation continued about prison and what it was like. Then the accused changed the subject, and the following conversation occurred. "Yeah, I was using hollow points too, so it just popping sound effect, brains are mush." Officer, "Yeah, fuck." Accused, "They go in and they don't come out." Officer, "All it takes is one, eh?" Accused, "Well, apparently not, because the 4th guy." Officer, "Well, yeah, well, fuck. The guy must have had a fucking head of steel." Accused, "Yeah, I remember. The last guy took 3 shots." Officer, 3? Accused, "Yeah." Head of, why is he saying, "Oh, yeah, the guy must have had a head of steel"? You going, maybe this, I mean, I don't know what they'd conversed about, but this seems like a place where maybe the officer was kind of revealing that he knew more about things than, again, we don't know exactly what all was said. So maybe. Officer, 3 to go down? Jesus, he's strong, eh? Accused, yeah, breathes. Don't think about it. It's over and done with now. Conversation continued. Accused, I was really pissed when I fired that first shot. My hearing was... Officer, hearing went? Accused, I couldn't hear anything because the gun was so loud. Fuck. And this is fairly common. He's shooting in a tight enclosed space. Most movies will not sort of talk about this. They got people firing guns in cars and in elevators and so forth. And, I mean, that's gonna cause some hearing problems. But the only thing that seems to do that fairly well is Archer. Archer's got, the tinnitus from all of that. So, yeah, that's just kind of a bit of realism because he's dealing with real life, not a movie. Officer, you didn't even hear the other ones. You just see it. Accused, yeah. Because like that ringing you hear in anything, any kind of movie or games. Officer, yeah. Exactly, I heard. Officer, too loud. Accused, it's fucked up. Officer, didn't see it coming. Accused, nope, none of them. Officer, how the fuck? With guns? Accused, they couldn't draw it fast enough. Officer, no skills. Accused, and literally probably 3 shots within a matter of 2 seconds. Officer, fuck, that's fast. Accused, yeah, it was crazy. Accused, fucking the mafia would have been impressed. Officer, no shit, fucking professional. Again, they got him bragging, which was a terrible move. The accused said the detective told him he was too slick for his own good. The undercover officer noted that there were no cameras and the keys were in the ignition. The accused responded, you just got to think about what you're doing. Plan ahead. Really? This is what you call planning ahead? Mr. Bourne? All right. The undercover officer responded that it was something to be able to take down 4 as one, and that the plan must have been decent enough. The accused replied, true enough. The accused also told the undercover officer how he got rid of his cell phone because he did not want them tracing him, so he smashed it to pieces. At one point in the discussion with the undercover officer, the accused was discussing his financial situation. Accused, no, I wish they wouldn't have been there, so I didn't have to do that. Officer, you just go alone? Accused, no, well, you have to have a crew, but I just wished that I didn't have to do that. Officer, strapped for cash, eh? Accused, 21 years old and 60 grand in debt already, man. What the fuck am I going to do? Well, don't consider law school because if you don't like debt, the law school is not for you. I mean, yeah. Officer, sometimes you just got to do something. Accused, take the initiative. Officer, yeah, grab the bull by the fucking horns. Accused, that's what I did. It just didn't end up very well. At least I don't have to pay for the truck anymore. Officer, no, I would say you don't have to worry about that fucking bill. Accused, nope, no bills for me. Officer, yeah, might save you some, would have saved you some headaches if you just could have, grabbed it beforehand, I guess. Accused, oh yeah, it would have saved me a lot of headaches, but what could I do? I don't know. Not buy the super expensive truck. Sell it and cut your losses. Not murder. Lots of options. Crime doesn't pay. This is pretty much the, pretty much the showpiece on this. So officer, accused, an opportunity. There we go. All but approximately 1,400 of the cash stolen from G4S has been recovered. And I'm guessing that remaining money was probably, spent in hotels and gas and those kinds of things along the way. Dr. Bernard Bannock, medical examiner, conducted autopsies on Eddie on June 18th, 2012, and Brian and Michelle on June 19th. In relation to Eddie, Dr. Bannock reported the following. Eddie died as a result of multiple gunshot wounds to the head. There were 3 gunshot wounds to the head associated with skull and facial fractures and penetration of the brain and brainstem by multiple bone fragments. Sorry, this is maybe a little graphic, but 2 of the wounds were through and through, and the 3rd is associated with recovery of multiple bullet fragments from the head during autopsy. The first gunshot wound entered below the right eye, with the exit wound in the right ear region associated with facial fractures on the right. There was stippling present on the face in association with this gunshot wound. This is present on the left cheek and the forehead region, as well as the left side of the nose and the tip of the nose. The second entrance gunshot wound was at the back of the head, with fracturing of the skull on the left and an exit gunshot wound behind the left ear. The third gunshot wound entered at the back of his head, with bullet fragments and core recovered and associated skull fractures and penetration of brain and brain stem by multiple bone fragments. So basically, you can see the injuries that were going on there. It's unpleasant. Thankfully, no pictures in the agreed statement of facts. In relation to Michelle, Dr. Bannock reported the following. Michelle died as a result of a gunshot wound to the head. The gunshot wound entered above the left ear on the parietal scalp. There was penetration of the right and left cerebral hemispheres, and an exit wound in the right parietal scalp above and slightly in front of the right ear. So from one side of the head to the other. In relation to Brian, Dr. Bannock reported the following. Brian died as a result of a gunshot wound to the head. There were 2 gunshot wounds. One is described as a superficial through-and-through wound of the back of the neck, involving the skin and the immediate subcutaneous tissues only. So that wouldn't have been fatal. The fatal gunshot wound entered his head above the left ear, left parietal bone, and penetrated the left side of the brain, transecting the brainstem, exiting the base of the brain and the skull base, resulting in multiple radiating skull fractures. So Matthew Schumann is recovering from his gunshot wound to the head. He is able to walk, talk, comprehend, and express himself. His prognosis is unknown, though he will always suffer memory issues. He was in the Glenrose Rehabilitation Clinic for 3 months. He continues to experience a variety of difficulties, including problems with meningitis and infection in his brain from the shrapnel. The brain injury has left him with a reading and writing deficit. One article that I saw noted that it was quite promising because he'd learned to read again and he was able to start texting. So but he wasn't able to drive. He's still, at that time, he was still frustrated because he wasn't able to do the things that he used to do, including sort of care for himself. So it may be that he is always in care, and that is a greatly tragic set of circumstances, especially for somebody who, was serving his country, it's just, and, didn't do anything wrong here, just wrong place, trusting the wrong person. Matthew was interviewed on July 5th, 2012, and recalled a portion of the evening when he was shot. He recalled being on a training night and remembered being with Eddie and the accused as they'd gone to training together. He just got his pistol that day. He recalled a female trainer, but was unable to recall her name. He wasn't sure if it was their first stop or not, but he remembered hearing what I thought was shooting, but it was the police breaking down the door trying to get me out. I thought I was getting shot again. Can you imagine how horrific that would be? It's just hard to fathom. There were so many of them for the training, and he recalls a really small room. He recalled crying and screaming and the police identifying themselves and breaking the door open. So all of which is admitted as fact, and I've sort of blacked out things because I don't want anybody harassing his counsel or anything like that. But yeah, this was a really tragic event in sort of local history, and it's a really tragic circumstance. There are some things we can learn from it. It's not that there's never some sort of something that we can't at least use to learn some legal questions. But this is a horrific event. One thing I already mentioned, but I'll mention it again just because it's kind of sticking in my mind, is how he probably thought that he was going to be mending his friendships with these people and he's going to make it across the border and, live this great life with this money, but that his friends are going to remember him fondly because he took the time to leave him this cash and sort of square up his debts. And that's not what happened. Everybody involved immediately went to, condemn him, to try to help the police catch him, and to reject the money. They're not sitting around, I'm sure, thinking, fond thoughts about him. They're not telling their friends, oh yeah, I knew him and he wasn't such a great guy. they're probably trying to forget that they ever met the guy and trying, not to have that subject come up in conversations. And if it does, they're probably saying, yeah, what a horrific circumstance. How did we never spot that this guy was this messed up menace? So at the end of the day, not only does he spend the rest of his life almost certainly in prison, but he does so essentially as he was worried that the people at G4S were mocking him and not treating him well. Well, man, if you could ever prove the people who were treating you badly right, you've done a hell of a job. It's everybody is going to be going there saying, well, I never liked him, and nobody's gonna think anything bad about that. What a way to just completely destroy everything you are as a person. And yeah, so I always get some comments when I talk about sort of police procedure and so forth. They're like, oh, well, that sounds like you're sympathizing. I really don't here. But it is still worthwhile to sort of learn about things, because most people who end up in custody are looking at much less serious charges. And it's just important to understand, just from a societal level, like if we have police doing things, we as the voting public have to sort of evaluate, do we like what the police are doing or do we disapprove of it? For that, we have to know what they're doing and understand how the process happens. Looking at court cases can really help us do that. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I thought I was going to do sort of a quick video to kind of get back in the groove of things, because with wedding and other stuff, it's been a while since I recorded one. And I thought I'll do something quick, because tomorrow I got to get up fairly early in order to go set up fireworks. Well, how'd that work out for me? Not so well. All right, if you are in Edmonton, come see the Canada Day fireworks downtown, because I am going to be helping set those up. When I say helping, I'm not involved in the planning. I'm not involved in the design. I'm not involved in any of that. I'm just going to go there and be a helper monkey to help wire stuff up. There's much smarter people at, who are setting that up, but it's still a lot of fun. I still enjoy the heck out of it, and that's why I do it. So anyway, thank you for watching. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. I want to do the Baldwin interrogation. I want to actually go through that, because there's a whole lot to learn from that as well. He did a whole lot of things wrong, or a whole lot of things badly, and really ought to have known better. All right. Let me know in the comments if you've got thoughts, or sort of what, if there's something you'd like to see. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level: Canada's National Firearms Association, the CCFR, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Marc-Olivier Damour. And at the $20 level, Mark, McTain, Jane Babin Luxor, Haywire, Dale Nesbitt, Cameron Johnson, Bruno R., Andrew Elsich, and Vicky Shevchik. I hope I got that right this time, but please let me know if I didn't. I also want to thank all of my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. Thank you for watching, and I hope this has armed you with knowledge. Cheers.